So I built Yoriichi, the original sun-breathing swordsman, in Elden Ring, and he was holy! In this video, I'm going to walk through how I built this powerful swordsman into Elden Ring and cleanse the lands between. Stay tuned.
Chill in the air, but the soul feels warm. Peace in the heart is the quiet storm.
Yoriichi's character appearance. Capturing Yoriichi's physical appearance in-game was definitely a challenge. If you've seen my previous video on building Kokushibo, then you know that there are not many hairstyles on the game's options screen to choose from, so I went with the same hairstyle as his twin brother. Yoriichi's face needed to capture the essence of his calm demeanor, but his eyes needed to reflect a warrior spirit. So, after about an hour of meticulous tweakings, this was the final product. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Uncle Dorian, why didn't you just copy the same numbers from your Kokushibo build video if Yoriichi is his twin? To that I reply, shut up! Who's doing the walkthrough here? I had to trust the process, but since you're here, you should too. Anyways, let's move on to the next segment. Yoriichi's stat focuses. So in building a swordsman within Elden Ring, you would expect for points to just be dumped into dexterity, right? Well, for Yoriichi, it kinda goes a little different. Going with either Flamar or Sacred Affinities means that your primary stat focus should be on Faith. Yeah, surprising, I know. But the main point of this build is to slay demons. And what better way to slay the undead of the lands between than to make a holy swordsman with a lot of faith? Get it? So yeah, Faith is your primary focus with a secondary focus on dexterity. Arcane should be the next focus because it controls your holy defense, which, ironically, strengthens your resolve against some of the most unholy enemies that actually do holy damage. Now naturally, I am unsure of what Yoriichi's health would have looked like, seeing as how no one could really challenge him, and he died of old age. But I'm not going to be unrealistic and say that his health bar was off the screen like a certain somebody we know. So, for the sake of having an actual bar, I set his vigor to 40 to avoid being soft capped. Mind and endurance can stay between 25 and 30 depending on which Ash of War you plan to use. Strength surprisingly is very low for this build, being raised only to meet the minimal Nagakiba requirements. Intelligence can be left alone, or if you want to raise it in order to use specific incantations, you're more than welcome to, but for this variation of the build, I left it as minimal as possible. Now that those are out the way, let's dress Yoriichi. Yoriichi's armor and weapons. So as many Yoriichi enthusiasts know, Yoriichi doesn't necessarily wear armor in the series. However, neither does Kokushibo. But for the sake of making these anime builds viable in the lands between, I decided to place armor on Yoriichi as assurance. Now since Yoriichi originally belonged to the Demon Slayers but was kicked out for failure to keep his brother from selling his soul to Muzan, I thought it would be a good idea to dress him in the Ronin armor set. You know, to show how he was now a lone traveling swordsman. But after a little more deliberation and a few quest lines later, I decided to rebrand Yoriichi to wear Blade's armor set. The reason why is because in my Kokushibo build, I gave Kokushibo the Raptor's Black Feathers chest piece to increase his jump attacks, but the only other armor that looks just as cool as that one would be Blade's. And it helps to signify Yoriichi's lone wolf status. I think it looks pretty cool on him, and at least I don't make him wear the wolf's mask. Now along with Blade's armor set, we've gone with a weapon that is a staple for all anime swordsmen, the Nagakiba. Yoriichi is the creator of sun breathing, which is the primordial form by which all other breathing styles come from. This was by far the toughest decision I've ever had to make when building this character because I was caught between two different elements, whether his sun breathing would be best represented by the use of Flame Art Ashes of War, or if Sacred Ashes of War would be a better fit. Sun breathing is subjective, and could be interpreted to mean a literal burning as if being burned by the sun, or could spiritually mean being cleansed. In this build, they could be swapped out according to the opponents you'll face, and it would make complete sense since Yoriichi is the origin of all styles, but for the sake of this video, and my particular build variation, I went with Sacred as the primary element. To supplement Yoriichi's holy route, I added the finger seal to keep from having to put too many points in intelligence. Using the finger seal allows Yoriichi to meditate and call upon the buffing powers of the incantations that we'll go over later in this video. Now, depending on how many playthroughs you've done, this build can be tweaked to be dual wielded, or just by having two Nakakibas, each with a different affinity, and Ash of War for the sake of swapping abilities at will. I sort of wanted to limit myself to not only give me a challenge, but because all we really know about Yoriichi is that it doesn't take him much movement to beat anyone. Well, onwards to the next segment. Hey, real quick, Uncle Dorian here. If you made it this far into the video, please support my effort by hitting the subscribe button and write a comment to tell me how I'm doing. These videos take a lot of effort to create, and every bit of support and feedback from you guys helps me to improve the quality of these videos and builds. Now back to the video. Yoriichi's Talismans, Physick, and Spirit Ashes. As far as talismans go, there's not a whole lot to choose from that would make sense for this build, but due to the dual nature of it, for the first time in these build videos, we have a build that makes use of 5 different talismans, though one is just a palette swap. Coming in at number 1, we have the Fire Scorpion Charm, which raises our fire attacks but lowers our fire damage negation. Fire is fun to play with in this game, so it doesn't get much better than that. Of course, at number 2 or number 1B, depending on how you look at it, we have the Sacred Scorpion Charm, which is like its fire counterpart, but it just increases our holy attack power, but decreases the same in negation. These are the staples of our powers as we switch back and forth between fire and Sacred Ashes of War. The Warrior Jar Shard or Shard of Alexander Talismans come in at number 3 because they increase the attack power of our skills. Depending on which ash you use, the effectiveness of your element against the enemies, these talismans will give your skills the necessary kick to get those runes in your pocket. Next up, we have the Ritual Sword Talisman, which increases your attack power when your health is full. Very rarely will we start a fight at low health, so it doesn't hurt to use this. And for the Piece de Resistance, we concluded with, drumroll please, Millicent's Prosthesis. Because obviously we want damage to increase ever so slightly as Yoriichi throws slash after slash. Plus the extra dex wouldn't hurt for the sake of weapon scaling. Looking at the tiers for the Physick combo, we have a few obvious choices to use. The Crimson Crystal tier is our starter just because we want to ensure that Yoriichi stays at full health to maximize his damage output. Depending on which element you choose to use, you can make arguments for the Holy Shrouding tier or the Fire Shrouding tier to increase your respective element's damage output. For the Spirit Ash, we've actually got 2 strong contenders. Naturally, we can justify using the Mimic tier because once again, all we know is that Yoriichi is so fast that he could theoretically be in multiple places at once while in battle. I know, y'all are tired of hearing that excuse, but it's the best way to justify this, alright? Now, the other choice is actually one that I didn't expect to be, which is Stormhawk Dean. I know, shocking, right? I would have never thought that I'd be justifying bringing a bird to a fight, but hear me out. I never knew that Stormhawk Dean actually buffs your character during the fights by increasing your physical attack power by 20%, and it counts as a special buff since it's a summon and not a weapon or physical buff. Also, the argument could be made that just as the Hashira have their own crows to aid them, that it will only make sense for Yoriichi to have a crow of his own, right? No? Alright, on to Yoriichi's moveset. Yoriichi's abilities. Because my particular Yoriichi build prioritizes faith over everything else, the pinnacle of his moveset starts off with the Sacred Blade Ash of War, which not only sends a holy slice from the Lord at the enemies, but it endows his sword with a heavenly glow that adds additional holy damage to the weapon's output, on top of the holy damage it already does from the infusion. Demons don't stand a chance. For the fire-infused version of this weapon, we use the Flaming Strike, which sends out a fan of flames and swipes the sword through the fan to ignite the sword. If your enemy is hit with the fan of flames first, the swipe of the sword is like icing on the cake as it glides through entities like butter. For buffing purposes, I went with 3 obvious choices. We have the Golden Vow to mimic his internal faith and dedication to his cause, Flame Grant Me Strength to mimic his resolve in handling his issues by increasing the strength of his sword swipes, and Blessing of the Erd Tree to mimic how he blessed people that he'd run into. The last one doesn't necessarily have to be used, but I ran it as an extra means to keep my health full. Where are we in the video now? Oh yeah, cue Yoriichi's playstyle. Yoriichi's playstyle. If there's one word I could use to describe Yoriichi's playstyle, it would be this. Holy. Yoriichi's entire existence in Demon Slayer, according to himself, was to end Muzan, the manifestation of evil. His resolve is no different here in the lands between, as he carves out a path to cleanse the world of all the corrupted shardbearers. Yoriichi is confident but humble. He'll often overestimate his enemies, and because of that choose to go all out when the intent to kill is perceived. To start off fights, Yoriichi will often meditate and come to terms with his inner resolve, and through use of Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, ensure that every swing is as strong as it can be. Yoriichi doesn't particularly care for long-winded fighting, and would much rather end the fights as quickly as they start. So when playing as him, move to end conflicts quickly so that you are not slowed down in your journey. Final thoughts. Overall, I loved this playthrough. It wasn't as challenging as the previous builds for Kenshin Himura or Hiei, but for the first time I was able to create a holy build, which is known to be one of the weaker elements in the game due to late game bosses hogging all of the holy power. I honestly felt empowered during every struggle and often took on the mindset of who I perceived Yoriichi was, which often led to me beating opponents alone that I previously couldn't beat. This is a build that I would run again, if you guys didn't want to see any new builds, that is. But anyways, that wraps up today's video. Thanks for watching, and if you made it this far, hit those like and subscribe buttons to support the channel so I can keep pushing out more crossover builds. I will see you all on the next one.
Cool breeze moves where the night is free. Calm waves drift like a melody. Uncle Dorian speaks with an easy tone.